Again, thank you so much for joining the International Elephant Foundation's Conservation Chat. Most of you on the call today know me. I'm Julie Bates. I'm the Donor Relations Manager for IEF. And I know that I'm the one who sends out a lot of the emails about these. So good to see everyone. Also for our staff on the call today, we have Deborah Olson, who is our Executive Director. And also Sarah Conley, who's our conservation coordinator. As people are continuing to log in, I want to just go over a couple of housekeeping items. As we start the presentation, we ask that everybody would please turn off their cameras to preserve bandwidth, because we have a lot of people on the call from different areas in the world, and it will just kind of help the presentation hopefully go a little more smoothly. And also, if you have any questions as we go through the presentation, we'd love for you to ask questions, but we're asking that you please put questions into the chat, and our moderator will ask the questions as we move through the presentation. So that said, I am going to turn it over to my colleague, Sarah Conley, our conservation coordinator, and she's going to tell you a little bit more about our presenters. Sarah?
Good morning, everyone, or afternoon, evening, wherever you are. Today's conservation chat is all about the Northern Rangelands Trust in Kenya, and we are so happy to have our guests with us. NRT is a member community conservancy. They host the second highest elephant population in Kenya, and with 60% of Kenya's wildlife found outside of protected areas that are in community lands. So this is a really important structure and focus for conservation. Our guests are NRT's Chief of Conservation and Development, Ian Craig, and Wildlife Protection Manager, Samuel Lekimaroro. Ian was raised in Kenya and converted his family's 62,000 acre farm cattle ranch into a rhino sanctuary. And that thrived, and that became the Lewa Wildlife Conservancy. And this conservancy model inspired others, leading him to become a founding member of NRT in 2004. Samuel has worked in conservation for over 22 years, including anti-poaching operations and wildlife protection with the Kenya Wildlife Service, and now as the Wildlife Protection Manager for NRT. So we are really pleased to have them both here. They are experts and trusted advisors for IEF, and we are so happy to have them with us. Welcome. There you guys are.
Good morning, people from the US and other parts of the world. Good evening to the people in Kenya, 6 p.m. Kenya East African time. As Sarah's introduced me, my name is Samuel Lekimaroro. I've worked for Northern Rangelands Trust for the last 8 years. And before that, I worked with Kenya Wildlife Service, the state custodian of wildlife in the Republic, for over 14 years. And so my colleague Ian also will introduce himself. And we look forward to having a very interactive session on what NRT is all about, how it works, and some of our flagship projects that we're doing with the community conservancies. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. And thank you, IEF, for your support over these many years towards our anti-poaching teams, and also for giving us the opportunity this evening to share NRT. I now am the Director of Partnerships, Growth and Innovation within NRT. And we all, as members of staff at NRT, feel really committed that this model for Northern Kenya is a game changer for people and for wildlife. And happy to share it with everybody this evening. So, Samuel, back to you.
So I'll go straight to our PowerPoint presentation and start our topics. I hope, Sarah, everybody can see our screen.
Yes, looks great. You can enter full screen mode and proceed.
All right. So what is NRT? And so, as we have said, NRT is a community membership conservancies organization that was started in the year 2004. And before that, the community conservancies in Northern Kenya started way back in 1995. And so there were a few community conservancies coming up. And so by the time 2000 was there, 2004, then the founders then thought it's good to bring all these community conservancies to have a unified voice championing the conservation in Northern Kenya. And so it was established as a shared resource to help build and develop community conservancies, which are best positioned to enhance people's lives, build peace, and conserve natural resources. Our mission is to develop resilient community conservancies that transform lives, promote peace, and conserve natural resources. A little bit of the background in Northern Kenya, because we cover 10 counties of Northern and Coastal Kenya. It's really a marginalized environment in terms of government resources, poor infrastructure. And so people only, and most of the people in Northern Kenya are pastoralists. So the key thing is that we are hosting the second highest population of elephants in the country. And as you all know, Kenya's wildlife, 6% is found outside of the parks and reserves. And so these people needed to benefit out of this. A big problem in Northern Kenya is drought and also illegal firearms that coming from infiltrating into the country from different areas. So poaching was a big problem by then. As I said, we cover, this is the map, what you see now in your screen is the map of NRT coverage. We cover 7 conservancies at the NRT coast here. This is the NRT coastal conservancies. We have 7 conservancies in 3 counties. The brown things you see here is the NRT member conservancies. The green is the national reserves. And these ones are county government supported community conservancies. So it's about 44,000 square kilometers of coverage in 10 counties of the Republic. So there are 47 counties in Kenya. NRT has footprint in 10 of those counties. How the NRT model is structured. So first we said it's the communities coming together as an autonomous institution to form conservancies. Then they apply to be members of NRT. So it is actually the communities that own NRT. So the traditional community landowners then elect some boards that work for 3 years as conservancy board members. And then the community conservancy management team that is employed by the board. And in each conservancy, they elect a conservancy chairperson. So if we have 43 community conservancies, then we have 43 council of elders, who then are the supreme body of Northern Rangelands Trust. And they meet twice in a year, in February and in August every year, bringing in also the government officials, key ministries, deliberating on the finances of community conservancies and any other issue that comes up. They are the ones who admit any conservancy that comes, that applies to join the membership. And they're also the one in the small governance committee that look into critical issues if a community conservancy is not complying with the regulations that have been put there by the Council of Elders. And so at the bottom of the pyramid is the Northern Rangelands Trust, a small secretariat that support the community conservancies. How the community conservancy model works is that one, it is an autonomous institution registered with government, either as CBOs, and then they represent a constituent or resident community of a defined geographical area. They are the landowners, and therefore they have most of them, as I said, they are pastoralists. Some also do farming in the coastal conservancies, but then they host a big number of both critically endangered and endangered wildlife, and to support in natural resource business development. This is how the structure is. At the top is the traditional community landowners, who elect a board that serves for 3 years. The community board, the conservancy board doubles up, especially here, now that we have Community Land Act. they double up as the land committee of about 15 members. So the communities elect the board that stays for a 3-year period, and then they are eligible for re-election for another 3-year period, and that's it. Then the board is responsible for the daily operations of the conservancy. They employ the staff, they run the budgets, and within the Community Conservancy Board, we have some subcommittees in it. There's the tourism committee that looks for opportunities for tourism, ecotourism staff to generate income. There's the finance subcommittee and the grazing committee that especially deals on traditional, the traditional pasture management within the conservancy. Then within the structure, we have the security bit, the scout, the conservancy scout, the complete chain of command. And then we have the driver and the transport office and the accounts. So the conservancy is really autonomous. They run their own resources. The NRT only supports. At the core of it, how we achieve to create resilient community conservancies, first, we invest heavily on governance, strong governed institutions. Once the boards are elected, then they go through proper training on leadership and management training. Then out of it, then big is livelihoods and business development, conservation of natural resources, and the peace and security aspect that we work closely with the Kenyan government, both the National Police Service and the Kenya Wildlife Service. As much as we host this wildlife in our community conservancies, the chief custodian is still the Kenya Wildlife Service, and in the Wildlife Act of 2013, community conservancies are anchored in that act. Section 40 of the Constitution, of the Wildlife Act, allows for the formation of community conservancies and stipulates what the community conservancies can be able to do. Our strategic objectives: one, our key pillar is governance. We strengthen the governance of community conservancies and increase government support to these conservancies. Some of the counties that we operate in, for example, in Samburu County, they have legislated a conservancy bill, law that guides what the conservancies can be able to do and how they finance those conservancies. So our key pillar is ensuring that the institutions are well governed, prudent and accountable board, and uses of resources that they have. There are supportive government legislations that these conservancies also work together in terms of their counties to lobby from both county and national levels to ensure that there are laws that guide their performance. Second strategic objective is peace and security. Where we live, as I said earlier, in Northern Kenya especially, there are issues to do with drought that sometimes these communities can conflict. So we work with the Kenyan government. There are government peace committees available in all areas that we operate. So us as NRT, we have selected elders, opinion leaders, highly respected elders that work with government to ensure that the communities stay together harmoniously. In terms of protection of wildlife, we have community conservancy scouts. These scouts are employed by the boards. They undergo legal training both within Kenya Wildlife Service Law Enforcement Academy as a basic course. And also some of them have legal police reserve status and also undergo some training with the police. Because where we operate in, illegal firearms is a problem. In the height of poaching, which motivated us to try and get some legal status and national police reserve status for our scouts, is because of the height of poaching in 2012, where in the landscape where NRT operates, we had about 120 elephants being poached in a year. So the conservancies applied to the government to have their scouts given national police reserve status, and therefore they can legally carry out anti-poaching law enforcement operations. And they have to undergo that training. And those who have been granted that status are answerable both to the National Police Service and at the county level, the area OCPDs. Once we have stable, well-governed conservancies with thriving wildlife, then the next thing is to try and generate income to these communities. So most of the community conservancies now have income generating activities through ecologists that they have invested in. What they do is that they identify opportunities they get for investors. Most of them have constructed some ecologists in their conservancies, and then they attract investors. So that is what we are doing now with our community conservancies under output 5 and 6, successful enterprises and financial success for households. Whatever income is generated within these tourism activities that they practice, then they use that money to one, for operational of conservancies, and number 2, for community development. 40% of the money that they generate, they use it for conservancy operations, while 60% go to community projects. And most of them are investing heavily on education and health, and also mostly on bursaries to the students, and the construction of school as well. We have a subsidiary of NRT called NRT Trading. It's for-profit, a little bit organization that supports community conservancy in beadworks and also in investing on what is called now Ujuzi Manyatani, is skills to the people who have not formally got education in school. So that is the company that helps us to do that. The next objective that we focus on is natural resources. Populations really were down in the 60s up to all 80s, when the elephant and rhino population went down for over 85 to 97% in the country. And so with proper security, well-governed conservancy, now we are seeing wildlife populations thriving. And with sustainable rangeland management systems, we have tried to reintroduce now flagship species, and Ian will talk about 2 of them now, but I'll focus on one of our success flagship projects in Serra Rhino just in the next slide. We have invested in what's called ranger-based wildlife monitoring system, WCOMS, because again, these community conservancies need to know how their wildlife are doing. So in each conservancy, they have a ranger-based data collection, monitoring system called WCOMS. We encourage wildlife protection through community policing as well, and also working with communities to seek local solutions for their problems. Human wildlife conflict is a big problem now, as we see poaching going down. In the last 4-5 years, we haven't had any elements of elephant poaching and rhino poaching in our landscape, touch on wood. But human conflict is on the rise, and it's a national thing that all stakeholders now are thinking about what next, and degradation of habitats. We haven't had rains in northern Kenya for over 4 years until this year. So it was also a big problem that we faced. So we are investing now on digitizing wildlife data collection in all conservancies. We are piloting 6 conservancies to digitize data collection, and then it is managed centrally through our Joint Operation Communication Center as linked, but the conservancies have the opportunity to analyze and interact with the data that they collect to see numbers and trends and stuff like that. We have a 5-year strategic plan that we're working on as NRT from 2021 to date. And the key focus there is about ecological monitoring, a little bit because of recovery of populations, key endangered populations like the black rhino, the hirola, the roadside giraffe in Baringo. We're also working with government, both counties and national, to try and translocate those populations to their traditional areas. Human-wildlife conflict is a big thing that we are all working on, and also on disease and surveillance for some really key species that like hirola, which Ian will talk about in a while, and also conservancy zoning and land use planning. So let me talk a little bit about the Serra Rhino Sanctuary. And I'm talking about this because IEF has really invested in the protection of those rhinos through the support of Community Policing Initiative. Serra was started as a conservancy in 2001 between 2 group ranches, Losesia Community Group Ranch and Serolipi. They came together, established a conservancy, And Sera is a special place because it's a traditional grazing area for both, for three tribes, Rendile, Borana, and Samburu. So they always, during the dry season, converge. It was a no-go zone. It was a good area for the rhinos, but due to conflict, nobody could access pasture in that area. So Sera now has employees on the wildlife protection team from all these three communities, and it's one of our success projects. We put in 10 rhinos in 2015, and that population has steadily grown up to 21 black rhinos now. Although we lost, I mean, it could have been 24, but we lost 3, one due to predation and another one because of fighting, and one was premature birth. So it's one of the fastest growing populations in the country, and it has become a pillar of peace amongst the communities in that part of the country. I'll allow Ian now to talk about the Hirola Community Conservancy.
Thanks. Okay, so obviously elephant is a sort of key focus of IEF and our history and working relationship. But Hirola are the most endangered antelope in the world. Very few people have heard about them. There's none in any zoos. The local community, the Abdallah community, are extremely possessive, proud of these Hirola. They were translocated, a small number, from Tana River to the Sava National Park in 1966. That population was then supplemented in 2000. And then the community brought a court case against government, and they won a court injunction against government to move any more. NRT started in 2004, and as the community model continued to grow, it had been applied to join NRT. They had formed their conservancy in 2004 as the sort of community conservancy movement was starting to find its feet. And they applied and joined NRT in 2006. Initially, we were all naive to Hirola. We didn't know any of the details. So we brought in a team of KWS, community, NRT, and to look at why they were declining. Initially, they declined from disease. In the 70s, there were about 15,000 animals. By the time we got involved, they were down to about 600 animals. And the big die-off was disease, but then they got below a threshold where they simply could not increase anymore. So we did a scat analysis, and we found that there was a very high percentage of Hirola hair in the scat of lion, wild dog, cheetah, leopard, hyena that are very abundant there. They're plentiful, the predators down there. And there was some poaching for bushmeat. So through the community policing teams, 9.6 and 9.7, we managed to reduce the poaching to virtually zero, but the predation continued. And so everybody came together, and in 2012, the community, with NRT's help, fenced off a 3,000 hectare predator-proof fence. Now we put in 48 animals, and that built up to 150 head of Hirola. This is out of a world population estimated at a low of 350, a high of 450. It's in a very sensitive area of Kenya on the Somali border, so difficult to get accurate figures. And just the scale of that land is massive. So now the animals within the sanctuary had built up beyond their carrying capacity and needed releasing either into the wild or another sanctuary. So we collared 5 animals, put a system in place to release them from the sanctuary, and they were released. And then over that next 9 months, 60% of the released animals we released, 61 were killed through predation. So, and then we had a drought, and as we stand now, we're back to about 55 animals. The community are managing them. They continue to decline outside in their natural habitat, just based on anecdotal evidence and the 2 populations that we're monitoring outside the sanctuary. And it's heading for a crisis, Hirola. And what we do about it, there is no obvious solution. The next move from NRT's perspective is to bring together a community meeting, a wide spectrum of that community, to listen carefully to what ideas there are from within the community. We're speaking to the zoo community in the US, who are currently running a program similar to what they've done for the American condor, to see what the minimum numbers are to be able to sustain themselves in the wild. So yeah, I welcome the opportunity to share this with everybody, because it's a real conservation challenge and nobody is coming up with the answers at the moment. Interestingly, little herd of elephant broke into the sanctuary 4 years ago, 8 animals, out of the bony forest, where in the 60s, the bony forest would have had about 20 to 25,000 elephant. They were all poached down to about 200, 250. This little population broke into the sanctuary, and they're now 11 animals. Little anecdotal story, but they're doing really well there. Onto Rothschild's giraffe. A lot of these conservancies, they need a flagship. They need something that they can really pin their flag to demonstrate both the conservation value, to provide employment, to be able to bring in tourism, and to give a little bit of a cause. And species that don't compete with traditional pastoralism, like giraffe, are an obvious, easy win. And in Baringo, when the Ruko Conservancy was set up, with, ironically at the time, a prime purpose of securing peace between two communities there that had been conflicted for a long time, community asked whether we could help move giraffe onto an island in the middle of the lake. Quite a mission. Catching the giraffe, putting them in the pens, moving them, and then designing a barge that would move them across the lake onto this island. Well, we achieved it. It raised some great publicity for the community, for NRT, for Kenya. It was very successful. Well, we were caught unawares when all the lakes in the Rift Valley started rising, the water level started rising. And what had been an island that we expected to carry 30 plus giraffes suddenly shrunk, where even 9 giraffe was too many. So we had to move them again. And caught them, moved them, and built the sanctuary on the mainland now, on the community land. And this is a sanctuary just for giraffe. Livestock, pastoralist usage of it continues. And we moved them across onto the mainland. Now we moved 9 animals, and we're now up to 14. And so it gives the Conservancy a focus, a cause. And the long-term plan here is that it'll be a recipient area for the giraffe from Rothschild's giraffe from the other sanctuaries in Kenya, because all the Rothschild's giraffe in Kenya are within fenced sanctuary. There's no free-ranging Rothschilds. And then Ruko will be used as a releasing area to let these animals go back into the wider Rift Valley, north of Baringo, on a free-ranging basis. Back to you.
So some of the project areas that conservancies are now in this phase investing on is gender. Traditionally the pastoralists were putting youth and a little bit of women in the backseat in terms of decision making. So we have now, as NRT, created a fully fledged gender office that advocates for that. In terms of the revenues they get and the incomes they generate, they are focusing on community livelihoods projects in water. They're also doing health programs. One case is the Biliko Community Conservancy. It is about 200 kilometers away from modern hospital facilities. So they have invested in, through the Community Livelihood Fund, to build a fully maternity hospital and also teachers' housing. And also some of the consultants are also heavily investing in education infrastructure and also in terms of opportunities for scholarships and bursaries to the needy students. What is the next phase and the evolution of NRT? We are building greater capacity at the conservancy level. We have a 30-year vision to guide on that. with greater inclusion of youth and women in the decision-making process. We also are encouraging now, not at the community level, but to household level engagements. We have decentralized NRT secretariats to the region. We have 5 operational regional offices with all the staff, mostly coming through our community conservancies. So we have a regional office in Isiolo for Isiolo conservancies, another in Samburu, Laikipia, and NRT West. The model is also exporting now into Uganda. We have one community conservancy. We are working closely with the Uganda Wildlife Authority and Uganda Conservation Foundation. We have created one conservancy. They have applied to join and admitted to the NRT membership. So we're still at the baby steps to operationalize that conservancy. It has now a fully trained board. And this is all because of the success of the model in Kenya. And so we have exported it to Uganda. We are also accelerating digital data collection as NRT to empower the communities to own and analyze data from the conservancy level. Great investment is also on government partnerships. The conservancies have now formed conservancy regional associations. We have Samburu County Conservancy Association, Isiolo Conservancy Association, Laikipia, and what they do is lobby for national and county resources from their counties, and also cross-border regional collaborations, as I've said about Uganda.
That was great.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Okay, perfect. Well, you guys did beautifully, and we have a lot of questions. People are very engaged with what you're talking about and the whole NRT model. So why don't we start with the whole concept of the conservancy model? It's such a great one for conservation. How can we encourage it to spread into other countries, maybe even into Asia? And what are the key components in developing a conservancy model?
Yeah.
Sorry, put this on the back foot. Just repeat it quickly, and then I just listen carefully. Sorry.
No worries. Since the conservancy model is such a great concept for conservation, how can we encourage it to spread into other countries, maybe even into Asia? What are the key components to developing such a model?
So the key components is a community who wish to come together to conserve, that they have a habitat, an ecosystem, a species, however small, that they wish to come together to conserve. Our experience to date is best covered by seeing is believing, is to jump in a car, jump in an airplane, come and spend a week with the communities that are conserving wildlife and running conservancies themselves. And then every country is different, is our experience. Every situation is different. Every social context is different. But in the case of Uganda, the community, first of all, government came down, then the community came down, and then the political leadership came, and slowly everybody came together, and then there was an exchange of visits. Long term, we'd love to consider NRT to be a learning center, an exchange of staff both ways, so people could learn from experience on the ground.
That makes perfect sense. I think we have a lot of questions about communities in general. So what you said about how you need that community engagement makes a lot of sense. But communities also face a lot of human-wildlife conflict. So do you have any ideas about how that should be addressed, or how do you work within the communities to address their needs with conflict with elephants and other wildlife?
So one thing we have done is that we are using data collected from our community conservants to guide on our decisions and working with government. So over time, we have analyzed data on number of conflicts and the causes of conflict. In some instances, it's all about, water. So we have worked with governments, for example, to deseal some dams that the elephants need to use. Northern Kenya is really very dry, and water is one of the commodities that both wildlife, humans, and livestock need. So that's one of the programs. Number two is about elephant exclusion zones. For the case of Laikipia and Ibunga Conservancy, over time, we have seen there is a big problem on conflict between humans and elephants. So we have erected about 6-kilometer elephant fence that allows people to move in and out, but excludes elephants from moving into built up areas, and working with the communities to keep away from elephant corridors. The other thing that we have piloted in one of our community conservancies to allow people to coexist with wildlife, with elephants especially, is the issue of livestock consolation. The government is, through KWS and the Ministry of Wildlife and Tourism, are the ones responsible for compensation of victims of elephant conflict. It takes time. It boils down to money from government, but as conservancies, they are piloting on livestock and human consolation, just to say sorry for a loss of a person or livestock, as they wait for government to come in and work out on compensation. Those are some of the areas. Also on predation, some of other partner organizations, for the case of Mebai, they are supplying communities with predation lights that keep predators from their homesteads. So those are some of the incentives we're using at the local level to try and mitigate that. But at the national level, I know there's a big debate on the strategy and policies that guide on human-wildlife conflict, because it's our biggest problem as of now.
Absolutely. And human-wildlife conflict is a big problem everywhere there are elephants and big animals. So it's very complicated, and we know that coming from an IEF perspective. We have a bunch of questions. One is specifically about your organization flow chart. They're asking, what is grazing?
Grazing, as I said earlier, Northern Kenya is predominantly pastoralist communities, and they have their traditional structures of managing resources, both during the wet and dry season. They allow people to graze in this part of the conservancy and not in this part. They keep on rotating. That helps in preserving resources, as drought is a big problem here. And number two, to allow regeneration of vegetation and rangelands for the communities. So as livestock move into some part of the conservancy through the grazing committee directed procedures, then wildlife can be grazing on the other part. And then, it's that kind of interaction to preserve pasture for the future.
Makes perfect sense. I think that really segues into the huge life differences that people in the Western world experience versus where you guys are. Can you talk about the differences between sort of how people live in your region of Kenya and sort of what people here might expect? I think that might give some context as to the challenges that you guys address.
This is a massive topic, because it's not just the differentials between the West and the developed world and the world that we all work in. Even within Kenya itself, there are massive disparities between wealth, land use, land ownership, and all the issues associated with, and also culture comes into this. So if we look at the connection with the developed world, Northern Kenya is blessed to be an open landscape, that wildlife is moving across this entire ecosystem as they will. We were collaring elephant this morning. Those elephant will cover an area 200 kilometers, from where we were today. So they're covering vast areas across this landscape, and it's different ownership, different ethnic groups, different issues. And this isn't across agricultural land, it's across pastoral land. So it's compatible with wildlife. So the big difference between developed world here and here is this is community land community proprietorship, wildlife belongs to government, decisions are made by government, and this NRT model is trying to establish a flow of benefits from a government asset, being the elephant, back to the communities who own the land and have to live with these elephants. When we come back to a more Kenyan context, if we look at the Mara, high rainfall, high agricultural potential, conflict with elephant raiding farms. If we come back to northern Kenya, it's much more about conflict for water. Cattle and livestock being killed by elephant and the issues associated with that. And then the fact that the national parks are all too small, that the few parks in northern Kenya cannot carry 8,000 elephant. The country needs the community land to accommodate these elephant once they move away from the parks. The great thing about this model is that there's a flow of benefit from hosting those elephant on your land. So I hope that covers it in a broad sense of the word.
Absolutely. And I think that segues into a few other questions that we're getting in the chat. Can you first talk more about the household engagement that you talked about? I guess that's maybe some of your outreach, and then maybe that will segue into the alternative livelihoods and the beadwork and things that you guys do to help increase sort of quality of life and livelihoods for people in the region.
So when we talk about now focusing on household engagement, previously in the community conservancies, it was just, mainly at that point in time during the start of conservancies, some elites people were thinking this is just something for local people to deal with. Now, because of the growth of the model and the benefits that come out of it, it's attracting everybody from the community to learn and understand what's going on in the conservancy. And they want to know, it's becoming a platform to lobby for government resources. It's shaping everything from any development that comes into the community. So we want now the conservancy boards and the NRT to focus more, and that's why we have regionalized our offices to deal directly to individual persons and individual villages. As they elected the boards now, it's not just a general election that's being done by the communities. It's about identifying and zoning areas to get all areas getting represented. And in the case of beadworks as well, we have now individual persons gaining experience and learning from our NRT trading team on beadworks. So that's the level of engagement now we want to focus more on, including the youth. So we have women engagement programs, youth engagement programs, elders engagement programs, all to enlighten and everybody to understand and move together as one in the community.
That's fantastic, because I know from IEF experience, the specific regional approaches as opposed to sort of a one size fits all is how you make real progress. So that approach that you guys are doing is excellent. We have a lot of people wanting to know how they can get involved. So I think this is coming from someone in Africa. How can one volunteer to participate in the conservation efforts, especially giraffes? He's based in Nairobi.
It's actually not an easy question to answer for multiple reasons. That the actual decisions around giraffe, around wildlife, rest solely with government. The NRT is a facilitator, and then it tries to bring all the moving parts together to help promote the conservation of giraffe, for instance. There are two giraffe programs that one could easily get involved. One is a San Diego Zoo supported Twiga Walinzi that is studying giraffe across the whole of the NRT landscape, or the whole of the NRT ecosystem and the different giraffe populations. The other is Ruku Conservancy that is very strongly focused on giraffe. And so to meet the team, meet the board, meet the chairman, meet the manager, understand where their priorities are, and help them champion their cause, it would be great. Those are the two opportunities.
Wonderful. And then from a US perspective, we know conservation is a luxury. It's people are trying to survive every day, don't necessarily have the funds to invest in conservation. So what can people in the United States do to help support this work?
Yes, as conservancies, we are still much dependent on donations to help sustain conservancy operations. And out of the conservancy operations, because of the tourism lodges they have, then there is a multiplier effect in whatever money comes in through funding, donor funding, to multiply what they can earn through tourism and sustain their conservancies. What the NRT now is doing at this phase is that we are trying to provide communities with, through the donor funding on community livelihood improvement projects. Then that money, most of them are investing for income generating activities through ecotourism. So donor money is still a big thing that conservancies need. One, to help run conservancy operations, put tanks in their conservancy vehicles that sometimes even double up as ambulances to help people go to hospitals, and to help protect the already thriving population in Northern Kenya. Yes.
Sarah, I'd just add also to what Samuel was saying, is that, NRT is a team effort. And it's so diverse, the skills that are required to promote and run NRT smoothly and provide the support to the conservancies that they are asking for. We need ambassadors across the world. We need visitors. We need people promoting the beadworks across the world. Nobody knows or cares about Hirola. We need some champions for Hirola in the world. We're going to lose them. And so if one looks in depth at the NRT website, understands all these multiple moving parts, we all have our different skills and interests in conservation. And NRT is increasingly trying to change the narrative of conservation. Of course, we're saving this and stopping conflict and saving Hirola, but we need to make conservation of value to people. And that's what Samuel was talking about, the health, the education, the clean water. And so the answer to your message is where your skills are, where your interests are, have a look at our website and see where somebody can work with us to try and promote this model.
Fantastic, yeah. So you just mentioned the beadworks. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about that and maybe plug their website? Because I think that's something that people will be interested in, a good way to support NRT.
Let me try to put it into context. So we have 9 conservancies that have women who do beadwork. Beadwork is, beads in this part of the country, in terms of culture, is something they value the most. Even me, I'm wearing a bracelet made of beadworks, especially to the Samburu and Maasai communities. So it is tied into the community conservation model. They have identified households and best star beaders in the communities. They used to do it as a pastime thing, just for cultural issues. Now it's becoming attractive and commercial. So through the NRT trading, they have identified women in 9 conservancies. They have a lead person called a star beader. They give them the patterns and designs and materials. The women then will do the beadwork stuff. There is quality control in the NRT trading offices, and it's available for international and local markets. Whatever money comes out of that, the women, because they have been provided with beading materials, they haven't bought any, but the labor is what they're being paid, and it attracts some good money to the households. And so if you go to our website and look at the beadworks, you'll see that the women are improving the lives of their people. They have built businesses, they have taken children to school, and they have even donated some of their money through beadwork to the community conservancies to support in operations. I think last year they donated about like 6 million to the community conservancies to support in conservancy operations, as much as helping their household income. So that is what beadwork is all about.
That's fantastic. And I think that really focuses everyone on the fact that if you help the communities, you are also helping wildlife. So why don't you mention what the Beadworks website is so people can go there?
Maybe just in our NRT website, there's also a place called Beadworks in the website, and you can click into that to get all the resources that you need.
Perfect. And we'll add a link when we post this. So
yeah.
we'll have all that for everyone. Another thing that Ian, you were talking about the Horola. So one thing that we always try to emphasize is how conserving elephants and protecting elephants has such a great impact for protecting so many other animals. I think the Horola are a great example of that. Because you guys talked about the 9192 helps protect them, helps protect the giraffes and the rhino.
Yeah, the Ishakbeen is a very tidy example of what you just raised, in that, you know, it's the most endangered antelope in the world. The community have a deep pride in it. The world's, you know, the conservation world has come behind the community to support it. Now they're building schools. Currently putting in a big water project there. There's employment there for about just over 40 people. It's not an area one can take tourism. When you move into some of, and this is a big complex story, but as you move into some of the other conservancies, for instance, Sarah, then you start bringing in now the carbon benefits, which are massive, and the flow of funds from the carbon sequestration to the communities. So yes, conservation is a big, broad word that captures a lot of moving parts now, and increasingly so. You know, 20 years ago, we were just saving rhino. Now, you know, this is like education, water. It's a basic human need to conserve.
Absolutely. Basic human need to conserve. I like that. And that brings up some more questions that we're having about tourism dollars, and just, so are there opportunities for them to visit NRT? And how does that work as far as tourism dollars supporting wildlife conservation and the communities living with the wildlife?
So there's 7 lodges, hotels within the NRT conservancies. And how these lodges work is that they are on community land, and then an investor will come and negotiate with the community to build a lodge, and it'll be on a build, operate, transfer basis. So they'll have a lease for 30 years to operate the lodge. There's a conservation fee. So when you come and you book your holiday there, there's a sum of money that is transferred to the community through the conservancy for every night that you stay there. The more, you know, the highest conservancy now is probably generating about $350,000 a year from tourism. And then there's a local market now, an increasing local market, and the conservancies are building self-help, what we're calling banders, but little like a B&B, but self-help within the conservation areas. And there's an increasing demand for that. So it's a growing source of revenue. And when put alongside the carbon, it's about 50% of the revenue for the more successful conservancies. We have a website there called Big North that maybe you could add to this, that you know, captures all the tourism opportunities within NRT.
And so to add on that, how tourism dollars contribute to wildlife conservation is that whatever money comes through bookings and landings, 60% of that money goes to community projects, and 40% is plowed back by the Conservancy Board into the Conservancy operations. And that will mean welfare for the scouts that protect wildlife. It means vehicle patrolling. It means salaries and stuff, uniforms and equipment for the rangers. So those are the moving parts on how one thing can lead into another.
Wonderful. That, I think, is a great explanation of kind of the symbiotic relationship of everything that's going on. This isn't a question, but in the chat, I think one of your one of your locals has commented that our rangers work closely with Kenya Wildlife Service Problematic Animal Control Unit to combat human wildlife conflict. So I think, again, that talks about how great the group effort is. Did you want to comment on that at all?
Yes. KWS, as I said, is the chief custodian of wildlife in the Republic. And in our mobile anti-poaching operations teams, we have embedded 4 KWS rangers in both 93, 97, and 96 anti-poaching teams, working, on a monthly basis. So they give us 4 KWS rangers working with our teams and change every month. We don't pay them anything. It's just a collaborative effort that we work with. And in case of a bigger problem, like the case of elephants moving into one area in Meru County that does not have a conservancy footprint, we brought in KWS problem animal control units. We gave out our anti-poaching mobile teams. We call on 4 elephants to monitor that and just keep those elephants safe in community built up areas. There was no rain. Unfortunately, it was only that area that received that rain in the beginning of the year. So that's the collaborative effort that we're putting in as a country to mitigate against human wildlife conflict.
Excellent. And that I think is a great way to wrap this up. Oh, we have one last question. Let's see. Because we only have a couple more minutes. Oh, so someone's asking about ivory poaching. Has elephant poaching generally reduced since China's ban on ivory trade in December 2017 compared to, say, the early 2000s? They read something about it in the New York Times about tragic poaching of an elephant matriarch and her calves. So what, if anything, do you have to say about ivory poaching and the trends in that?
The ivory bans across the world have been the most extraordinary success. And we're judging it on several different layers. The black market value of ivory. So if somebody kills an elephant, they want to sell it into the cartels, into all the chain of that feeds the end market. When 2012-13, the price was about $150 to $180 a kilo for the poacher on the black market. After the bans, it dropped down to $30 or $40 per kilo on the black market. It simply wasn't worth killing elephant. In 2012, as Samuel said, we lost 122 elephant to poaching. Last year we lost 2?
2, yes.
We lost 2 last year to poaching. So it speaks for itself. So yes, we're losing elephant through conflict, they're dying, but we never pick up a carcass now without its ivory. So, just long may these bans remain in place, may they remain effective. They're saving people's lives, they're saving elephants' lives. And elephant is sort of moving into areas where historically they simply haven't been able to go. Big success.
And that helps the whole ecosystem. If they're able to move into places where they weren't able to go before, that's fantastic.
It saves IEF money as well. So.
There's always more work to be done, but yeah, you're right. It makes our job easier. I mean, isn't the goal eventually to put conservation organizations out of business because we've done our job? So hopefully one day that'll happen. We do have some people commenting. There are some Toss the Tusk events going on in the United States coming up, where people can get rid of their old ivory and sort of contribute to this movement. So we will post about that when they come up. But thank you so much. You guys are getting so much praise in the comments. Everyone learned so much. They loved what you did. You both were excellent answering all the wonderful questions. So thank you. And we definitely look forward to part 2, where we'll talk about the 9-1 and 9-2 teams. So I know everyone who's here will be very excited to learn more about the excellent work. Let me turn it over to Julie real quick.
Yes, and I just wanted to just mention before we sign off, as Ian and Samuel were mentioning on here, how can you help? And probably one of the biggest things you can do is to help by making a donation. As Samuel mentioned, it does take donations to sustain the conservancies. So every little bit will help, whether you can donate $5, $50, $500,000. It all matters. As Ian mentioned, we all can become ambassadors around the world, and that's what it's going to take to really help drive these things forward. So we appreciate you all for being here today. And before we sign off, I would like for everybody to turn their cameras on so we can give our presenters a big round of applause for the great presentation and all the wonderful work that they're doing. So thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. They're done.
And we will be sending out a recording for anybody that RSVP'd. So I'll have your email address for that. So we'll send out a recording, and feel free to share the recording with friends and colleagues and let them know about our chats. And we will hopefully see everybody back next month.
Thank you. Bye.